hello, and welcome to Creation Watch. Hello, my beautiful live chat over here, participating and just chatting right away. Good to see everybody this evening as well in the live chat for Creation Watch Wednesday. I do hope you all are having a good week so far, and thank you for joining me, my beauties and bees. Today we are returning to a channel that I've just been having a lot of fun with, but no one else seems to be giving him the time of day though. So yeah, maybe maybe he's my special someone that I get to do back and forth with or something. This is Creation Unfolding. It's this guy doing videos about creationism and why evolution is wrong and all this good stuff. So, answering answers in Genesis. What is young Earth evolution? Yeah, he did. We've covered a few of these. We've covered a few in the past. This isn't somebody new that we're talking about. We are revisiting a channel that we've already spent some time with. Horse evolution, what should Christians think, things like this. But today we're going to focus on these two newest videos, one from 4 weeks ago and one from 5 days ago. Combined together, they're about 11.5 minutes long. We're going to see what we can glean from them. So, what did Adam look like? Part 1.
We intuitively believe that Neanderthals were primitive. We more than likely think that Neanderthals were primitive because we've been led to believe
the Neanderthals were no more primitive than the people they lived alongside, at least in their first, when we first interacted with them. They were probably technologically the same level that Homo sapiens were. So
believe that they possessed primitive traits. Neanderthals, in contrast to modern humans, had thick brow ridges, a large jaw, a sloping forehead, and robust teeth. Since similar features are found in apes, and since apes and humans are...
So those features aren't necessarily primitive, though, is more indicative of a coarser diet where they need to chew more. A brow ridge and sagittal crest is going to add for musculature, for a more robust jaw, for chewing and mastication of food.
Thought to share a common ancestor, then we are often taught that these features are primitive. Even Richard Owen, a 19th century...
Again, primitive, more diet directive.
Animist and a creationist fell foul to such an interpretation. Speaking of the brow ridges in non-human primates, Owen says,
love from the hive, John Hudson. Mwah. You have a good one.
It may be concluded, therefore, that Owen says, it may be concluded, therefore, that such feeble indication of the supraorbital ridge, that's the brow ridge, as exists in man, is as much a specific peculiarity of the human skull as the exaggeration of this ridge is characteristic of the chimpanzee.
So, to be clear, Sir Richard Owens was defiantly against out of Africa and common descent of apes and man. He didn't believe that man was descended from apes. He was actually quite religious. Had quite a multi-origin stance on the web of life.
In other words, the lack of brow ridges is a distinctly human trait. He even used this logic to reject the then burgeoning idea that humans and apes shared a common ancestor.
Right.
Only one.
Owens was like steadfast against common ancestry between man and the rest of the ape lineage.
Does what he would have thought of the first Neanderthal skull, which was described in 1857. And this idea is still around in popular culture today. Since 1857, when the Neanderthal remains were found, the prominent ridges above the eyes, which were claimed to be an exclusively ape-like feature, have become symbolic of early man. And unfortunately, even in the sciences, the use of the supraorbital torus as a species-specific taxonomic trait has...
Yeah, we use bone measurements to designate different species within a genus. You can find the same kind of minor differences between lions and tigers, for instance. We just use these very subtle differences in thickness of this bone and this ridge, and to designate whether this represents a member of, if for instance, like I said, like Panthera tigris, Panthera leo, just based on these measurements of the skeleton, because skeletons don't have stripes and manes, and their skeletons look very much the same underneath. Jaguars too fall into this little bit of a measurement defining species designation. In obviously that's present in humans as well, in our common ancestors and our cousin species, that there's going to be subtle measurements between different bones of our body that are going to designate whether we're an in-group or an out-group. Yeah.
Has continued to the present. A supraorbital torus, by the way, is when the brow ridges connect to make a single feature. As it turns out, very large brow ridges, sloping foreheads, large jaws, and big teeth can actually be found in modern humans. Consider the skull of this man, who only recently died in about the 1850s. Notice the prominent brow ridges and the lack of these ridges in the generic anatomical model that we're all familiar with. Notice also the sloped forehead, which rivals even that of the Neanderthals. The robust jaw...
So, these are, again, your phenotypic traits that develop, help us designate groupings, and we take those measurements and say, is this within the range of a normal human? Is this in the range of a non-human homo species? Is this in the range of a different primate? So there's very, very fine-tuned measurements. They get the little micrometer out and they put it on the brow ridge and they take that measurement. And if it's within the human norms, then they classify as a human. Don't pretend like there's not measurements done on these different skulls to designate them into the group that they belong to.
Jaw and the size of the molars in comparison to our generic skull are also quite different. In fact, this particular skull even possesses a slight protrusion of the jaw called prognathism, a trait that once again is commonly associated with primitiveness. The length of the upper palatine and maxillary bones in comparison to those of the generic model really bears this out. As it turns out, some modern humans even possess an almost complete supraorbital torus. Now remember, that's the name given to the brow ridges once they connect into a solid feature. And keep in mind that some paleoanthropologists, even today, they still use a complete supraorbital torus as a species-specific...
It is a species-specific characteristic. It's like, so I guess this guy doesn't understand how gradients work. So when we designate a grouping, we're taking a gradient of all the homos that have ever lived, all the hominoids or hominids, or all the hominids that's ever lived. Let's start there. Taking a gradient and we draw a circle around it, right? And say these characteristics put this individual within this species group, right? That's not to say that other individuals outside can't share characteristics with the ones that are in that group, and that characteristic is considered a signifying characteristic of that group. It'd be expected that adjacent groups may also have this characteristic in some shape or form similar to the group within the circle. It's arbitrary that where we draw the circles, but it's just how humans are. We like to classify things into bunches. And when it comes to reproductive groups, it gets really blurry.
specific trait that's indicative of an evolutionary past. Clearly, however, these features are not primitive. Certainly, they are rare in modern populations, but they're not primitive. So what is the purpose for those brow ridges? Well, it actually depends on who you ask. This paper suggested that the lack of brow ridges is related to social cues and associated with eyebrow movement. But I think the best explanation comes from this paper, which suggests a biomechanical solution. Essentially, the very strong muscles attached to the mandible and the temporal region of the skull work to pull the sides of the skull down while...
Right, it's what type of diet your ancestors have is going to play a good deal of attribution. It's going to be the cause of your need to be able to masticate heavier substances, more tough food than ancestors that live off of a more maybe more processed diet, even, which is what we have today.
Biting tends to push the midline of the skull upwards. This combined action promotes bone growth in these areas, which can even occur during adulthood. Supraorbital development appears to be an adaptive response to net bending over the eyes that can take place even during adulthood if biomechanical conditions change. In other words, our modern obsession with soft, tender, and overly cooked meals may well have changed the very appearance of our skulls.
Right.
Now, from a creationist perspective, the presence of prominent brow ridges may even have adorned our first parents, dependent as they were on a plant-based high-fiber diet, which would require greater levels of bite force and longer periods of mastication. As it turns out, there are more than likely a number of different variables at work.
Now, I want everybody to note that we're 5 minutes into a 6-minute video about what did Adam look like, and I don't even think he's brought Adam up at all. I don't think he's mentioned him once. Not one mention of Adam.
And in the development of other cranial and jaw-related features. But the presence of these so-called ancient traits in modern humans should at least cause us to think twice before we assume that these traits and their presence in ancient peoples be interpreted in terms of Darwinian evolution. Of course, that leads to a few interesting questions. What are creationists to make of so-called primitive peoples like the Neanderthals? And what did Adam look like? To find out, please make sure to watch part 2, which is coming up soon. So that's all from me, Ken Colson, here at Creation Unfolding. Please go ahead and pound that like button if you thought this video was interesting. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button.
All right, we're going to go watch part 2 because it's out now. And finally, we'll know.
Neanderthals are sloping foreheads and large brow ridges in Neanderthals really evidence for ape ancestry?
Those are just they're homologies we have with apes, or that some apes have with. There's distinguishing features because we have homologies with apes that we use to differentiate Homo from the rest of the apes.
Now, in part 1, we suggested that Neanderthals are not related to apes just because they possessed large brow ridges and sloping foreheads. After all...
But not just Neanderthals. Neanderthals aren't just related to apes. We're all related to apes. You too. Me and you and... Yeah.
Humans that are alive today possess similar features.
Because they're also apes. Because humans are apes and Neanderthals are apes and Homo floresiensis is an ape and Homo habilis is an ape and Homo erectus is an ape. Australopithecines an ape. We can keep going.
But that still leaves some unanswered questions. If features like large brow ridges and sloping foreheads have got nothing to do with ape ancestry, then how do Neanderthals, as well as other so-called ape men, fit into the Christian worldview?
Well, those are characteristics of apes that are consuming a fibrous diet. That's what That's what I don't know if fibrous is the right word. Diets that could require a heavy deal of mastication, a lot of raw vegetable matter, raw plant matter, uncooked food, uncooked meat. That type of diet would be more beneficial and would have more success in the population with a heavier jaw, for chewing, and the heavier brow ridge for muscle attachment to masticate that way. Now, when we cook our food, that's why we're the odd man out, because in some groups of humans have moved more towards softer foods than others. Indigenous people, for instance, may still have a more raw diet but the benefits of a heavier jaw is found more when you got that raw diet, right? So that's why modern humans have such a reduced jaw, and a more reduced jaw than people just decades ago, because we eat softer and softer food as we move along.
Well, let me start by asking you 2 questions.
A good example is we got some people in here in the side chat talking about wisdom teeth. That's an excellent example of how we've gotten reduced size of our palate, right?
And I'll ask you to pause the video after I ask each question so that you can really think about it. So here's the first question. What do you think Adam looked like? And here's the second. Given these...
probably in the mythology, I would say he probably looked like your average Israelite, or I guess it wouldn't just be Israelite, because I think Adam is rooted deeper than the Israelite people. I think his story is rooted more and more into the ancient roots of Mesopotamia. So the people that lived in that area at the time, as far as archaeological records show, would have been dark-skinned, and they would have more primitive features and been smaller. So maybe about 5'5", probably, dark-skinned man with dark hair and brown eyes. That'd be the expectation that I would see. And then Eve maybe 5 inches shorter, so maybe 5 foot, 5'2" maybe, and dark skinned as well with brown eyes. That's my depiction anyway. Stephanie Helm says Adam looked like Morgan Freeman. That'd be glorious. I've seen people post images of what's his name? Vin Diesel. This is archaeologists. What archaeologists think Adam looked like.
These skull types. Which one do you think best represents Adam's? Now, in answer to the first question, I'm going to suggest that you thought Adam looked something like this. In other words, a non-white, darker-skinned person having Semitic-like features. What about the second question?
Because the culture
is struggling over
because the culture which the mythology stems from, right?
Which skull shape to choose. Perhaps you were looking for the more generic anatomical skull, something like this.
No, I think that they would have probably had given him a modern-looking skull. I think that the people in that area at the time had fairly modern skulls. It may have some more primitive features, possibly. I imagine the measurements of the skull have fluctuated a bit since that time period in humans, so it'd be expected to see maybe some more primitive features at that time.
In other words, perhaps you were looking for a modern human. I would like to suggest, however, that Adam's skull type probably looked more like that of the Neanderthals or even Homo erectus. And here's why. If large brow ridges, sloping foreheads, as well as some other so-called primitive traits have got nothing to do with ape ancestry, then Neanderthals and even Homo erectus...
all ancestry is ape ancestry, dude. All those Homo erectus, Neanderthal, Homo sapiens, Australopithecines, all ape ancestry, all of it. All features that we have are ape features. It's so weird.
Must have been fully human. Yet from a young age creationist perspective, all humans, which include Neanderthals and Homo erectus, must be traced back to Noah and his family. They can't be traced back to Adam because most creationists believe that pre-flood humans left behind no fossil record, and that the fossils we do...
Why not? So the people who got killed in the flood, you say all the dinosaur formations with the dinosaur bones in it, all the whales on top of mountains and all this stuff is evidence of pre-flood life. But there's no humans mixed in with that. Why not? Don't you people believe that the Paluxy footprints are pre-human or pre-flood human footprints? Oh yeah. Does Adam have nipples and a belly button, and is he circumcised? Good questions. It's pre-Abraham, so I wouldn't think he'd be circumcised. God didn't decide he messed up the cock meat until Abraham came along, right? He's like some good looking dicks, and then I looked at Abraham's like, actually, you know what? Can you take that part off? Let me see what it looks like. No human fossils in these rocks, but dinosaurs though.
Who have come from the post-flood world. Since Neanderthals and Homo erectus appear first in that post-flood fossil record, even before Homo sapiens, then it stands to reason that Noah and thus Adam more than likely looked something like this and not like this. So putting human origins into context.
So he thinks that Adam was a Homo erectus? Oh my goodness. Adam the Homo erectus.
Hypothesis. What if all post-flood humans look something like the Neanderthals or even Homo erectus? At the Tower of Babel, these early humans lost most of their culture when God confused the language. As early humans dispersed from Babel, many of them adopted hunter-gatherer cultures. Since the Earth's natural systems were still in a state of flux after a global flood, which I'm going to suggest ended in about 3500 BC, post-flood humans experienced an initial and rapid pulse in morphological diversity.
This is gross. Oh my gosh, he's just claimed that that all the different people groups around the world are unique descendants from Homo erectus ancestry. So that basically all the modern humans are different species descendant from Homo erectus. Because Homo erectus is a different species than Homo sapiens, right? Unless he's anyway.
Producing multiple different human groups, including Neanderthals, Homo erecti, and Homo sapiens. For whatever reason, the Homo sapien morphology began to dominate. This group seemed to possess great dispersal and exploratory techniques, together with interbreeding and genocide.
Oh, I want to redact that. He's talking about the different. So, Homo sapiens is one group. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to mischaracterize. I thought he was implying that all the races were that left Babel, because that's what mostly I've heard from creationists, is that all the people groups around the world are the results of the dispersal of at Babel.
All other human morphologies. These events may have taken less than about 500 years. At the same time, and as Earth's natural systems reached equilibrium and Homo sapiens became more settled, other climate-dependent traits like hair texture, skin color, and minor facial features became fixed in populations. Now, for a more detailed explanation on some of the ideas that I've proposed here, then please take a look at this paper that was recently published and presented.
Human History from Adam to Abraham, Integrating Paleoanthropology with Young Age Creation Perspective. I should send this to Erica. I'm sure she would love that. From Cedarville University. Ross M. P.S. Brummel. It's from 2023, so this is new.
At the International Conference on Creationism just this year. Okay, so that's all from me. Ken Colson here at Creation Unfolding. Look, please, if you thought that this video was in any way helpful, then share it on your social media platforms. Go ahead, hit the like button and subscribe for easier access to more videos later. Ring the bell while you're there. If you wanted to donate, then please, I'd appreciate that. There is a link in the description which will take you to a PayPal page. I also have a website.
Yeah, I don't disagree that there's the possibility that breeding out or outbreeding other people groups, because especially if they didn't live in big cultures like we do, is because humans live in groups of we've always been more prone to live in groups of dozens to hundreds, where other species of hominids seem to have lived in smaller, like family type groups of smaller bands, maybe just a few dozen people or less. So it may have been the fact that we lived in larger bands allowed us to either violently or culturally absorbing these people groups, violently, because people were still doing that. People are still doing that today, where they take the where they kill the men and take the women as prisoners, as the Bible says, and people groups, and I think that could have extended easily to other species of hominids as well, to taken as captives and integrated into the conqueror's society, certainly. But because they lived in smaller bands and maybe had less population, their presence is only reflected by tiny portions of like Neanderthal DNA, for instance, in our genome, or Denisovans, depending on which ethnic group you descend from. I think I don't know if Tsunami, if you're descendant from European, I know you may have some other ancestry as well, so you might have quite a bit of non-human DNA if you looked into it. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us in Creation Watch today, where we talked about what Adam might have looked like, and how this guy thinks that people dispersed after the Tower of Babel too. I got some fun new stuff going on in HiveScience coming up next, so stick around and I will see you guys over there.